Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I'm not sure where I read it. Probably a number of different places. Doesn't really matter. But essentially the lesson is, or the quote is something akin to everybody's an example of what you should do or shouldn't be doing. And there's a lot of truth to that. I've heard it years ago because I know I barked it out to my kids as they were younger. All my kids are grown adults at this point. They don't want to hear that. They're probably telling other people that at this point. But I think it's an important lesson. You stop and look. I always say if you want to be a better networker, look at the people who are good networkers and watch what they do. Listen to how they have small talk. And you'll see things in life. I remember seeing things in business when I had a corporate job. And there were different types of leaders there. It was an accounting firm, a professional services firm. So you have lots of leaders, lots of alpha types, and there were different management styles, and you could learn from each one. But I use that lead in because last week I had an exchange on LinkedIn that I wanted to share. And it's not a positive story, so I'm going to leave the person's name out of it. But I think it's an important lesson of really what not to do. People always ask, well, yeah, how do you use social media? I don't understand how to use social media. And quite honestly, how I use social media is to develop enough of a relationship that somebody's willing to have a conversation with you. And things happen via the conversation. If you stop and think about it, nobody's buying anything of significance just off of a link. You might buy a book, might buy flowers, something like that, but you're not going to spend thousands of dollars on coaching services or getting a book published just off of a link. Maybe some people do. Most people don't. Most people are going to want to talk to somebody and just get more information. So I get a lot of outreach on LinkedIn. People just, seeing my profile, want to connect for this reason or that. Some people I know already and I'm connecting with, and then there are other people where it's a cold outreach to me. And I don't do a lot of it. I don't outreach a whole lot myself. I've got lots of connections, and I will, but I'm very guarded about who I'm connecting with, who I'm reaching out to. But anyhow, the message I got, and I get a lot of these, I stumbled upon your profile and I'm truly impressed by what you have going on. Would be interested connecting and chatting more. And I get a lot of those, when somebody tells me they're truly impressed with what I've got going on, it's, do you really know what I've got going on? Have you really read my profile? And a lot of times people haven't. And that's kind of a disqualifier right there. If somebody's like, yeah, I've really impressed with you. I want to talk to you about you having your own podcast. And obviously they haven't read my profile enough to realize that I have my own podcast. It's clearly listed there. And if you had just looked a little bit, you would have seen that. So that's what I mean by kind of a disqualifier. And a lot of times, when somebody's coming off at me with they're truly impressed, it's a lead into a sales pitch. And so I'll look at their profile at that point. And if they're selling leads or they're selling franchises, which I sell a franchise, so I wouldn't be interested in buying a franchise. I know where we're headed. It's like it's this butter up. I'm going to butter you up and get you on a call and hey, I think we could be great partners together. Those are all they're all very tired, all very trite ways of trying to get someone's attention. So I looked at this particular person's profile, and it's like, okay, this is something that's unique. I don't know what the angle is here, but I just said, thanks for the note. If you want to talk, I gave my calendar link. I just indicated that I've got a lot of travel, so my calendar is rather limited over the next few weeks, and that's generally the case. If you want to talk to me tomorrow, chances are I don't have time on my calendar tomorrow. Tomorrow is completely booked, as well as the next 3 or 4 days. It's just it's a good problem to have. So that's where I'm at. Um, where this thing kind of came off the rails was, here's my link. If you want to schedule a time, schedule a time. You asked to, and the person then responded, I don't want to waste your time. I'd like very much to book a call, but I wanted to ask you about the podcast. I'd love to be a guest on the podcast. Do you think would be a possibility? So essentially, what this person is saying is, give me a thumbs up that I could be on your podcast, and we'll have a conversation about me being on your podcast. If that's not a possibility at all, then I'm not really interested in talking with you. Um, and to me, I had to read it twice, and it um, was I angry? I don't know that I was angry. It was just like, okay, who is coaching these people? I mean, where does this seem like it would work? Um, and you know, I can be snarky, I can be sarcastic. I try to hold that stuff for just polite, fun conversations and things like that, and not responding to a total stranger on something like that. And I just responded, thanks for the note. To answer the question, be on my podcast is a possibility. I interview, I shared who I recently interviewed that would be in line. But there has to be a reason for being on the podcast. And this is probably a sidebar lesson for this particular podcast. If you're looking to get on somebody's podcast, number one, listen to their podcast. No, well, number one, know what their podcast is about and listen to an episode or two, and you'll get a sense as to what the podcast is about. Not all television programs are the same. I think we could pretty much get that, right? Not all podcasts are the same. Some are true crime podcasts. Some deal with mindset. Some deal with mental health issues. There are all sorts of different themes to a podcast, and so just because you want to get on podcast doesn't mean every podcast is a good fit for you. Plain and simple. And a lot of times I'll have people calling, or not calling, they'll email is usually the way, or something, the means of contact, or it might be via LinkedIn saying, hey, I want to be on your podcast. And then it'll be, 6 or 7 lines or a few paragraphs of all the great things that they've done. And what they miss is they don't really know what the podcast is about. And they want to come on and share their story. And I'll tell you right now that everybody's story really is meaningless until it's wrapped into some sort of lesson. Yours. I mean, yeah, I'm sure you have a great story. Everyone has a great story. Their rags to riches story. But if it's just a story about your rags to riches story, that's what the Hallmark Channel's for. But it becomes important when that story ties into the theme of the podcast. And that's what you need to do when you're going to want to be on somebody's podcast. Hey, I see you have a podcast. I listened to this episode. This is what I'm about, and this is where I think I could add value. So at any rate, just a little sidebar lesson on getting on someone's podcast. You get a twofer for today. 2 lessons. So I told the person, you could be, there's a possibility. It's just a question of the value you can bring to the show. But then went on to say, I don't know anything about you or what you're looking to say, or what you're looking to say when you get on the podcast. So you probably want to start with that. Do you know what my podcast is about, or what I'm trying to achieve? And so then I shifted gears, and I really wanted to kind of address the tone of the email, or just the whole approach. And what I mean the whole approach was, hey, I would love to get a conversation on the phone, but I don't want to waste your time. I want this conversation to be about what I can get out of this. And I can't, if there's absolutely no possibility I'm going to get out of this what I would like to get out of it, then I don't want to waste my time. Um, and I told them, I said, I don't mean to be mean, but I find your email to be short-sighted and off-putting. Essentially, what they're saying is that the only value in the conversation is whether or not they're going to get a chance to get something, and that's a poor way to start a relationship. It's a poor way to start a relationship because, well, for a lot of reasons. Um, it's a taker's mentality is what it is. There are givers and then there are takers. It's a taker's mentality. It's like, hey, I'm looking to get something. I don't care about you. And if there's not a possibility I'm going to get what I want, then this is not going to proceed. And that's off-putting. It's dehumanizing. It's devaluing. It's really an insult. Um, and essentially, as I said, you're the only value you have in the conversation is what you could possibly get out of it. And essentially, I went on to share that you're implying that my podcast is the only thing there is to me. Um, what about this person was in the real estate profession? What about all the realtors I know? I network with a lot of realtors. It's just somehow I've connected into that. Just a lot of brokerages, people who consult with realtors. I just know a lot of people. What about all the other podcasters I know? So you're coming to me and you want to be on my podcast. And you know what? It might not be a fit. It might not be a fit, and that's okay. But what about all the other podcasters I know? Because I do know a lot of podcasters, and some of them are a great fit for people. Not necessarily. My show isn't for everybody, and their show isn't for everybody. And sometimes there's this passing back and forth or sharing of guests. This person was a great guest. I had them on. It was perfect. I think they'll fit on your show. Or this person's trying to get on my show. They're really not a fit, but I know this is something you're looking for. And so that sort of networking is happening amongst podcasters. Um, and what about all the people I know in my network? I just have a broad network. There's a lot of ways that I can help people. And so, basically, this person's implying that, you know, implying that they have no interest in, in just maybe being interested in me and maybe helping me. Not that I expect it to be quid pro quo. I've never approached something saying, "Well, I'm going to do this for you. I want you to do this for me in return." That's not my style. But it's always refreshing to have somebody be a little bit interested in what you're about. And if there's absolutely no interest in what you're about, then it's hard for me to want to invest time in them. Again, not quid pro quo, but if you're saying, hey, no way, no how, I'm not even going to, I'm I'm going to barely know your name. It's just not a good use of time. Um, and I don't know. It's, the whole notion, there's so much to just getting acquainted with somebody, having an interest in them, and at the same time, then telling that what telling them what you're interested in achieving, what you're trying to do. Yeah, I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z, and one of my strategies is to get on people's podcasts. I know you have a podcast. I don't know if that's a possibility. I just think I think this person, and I told them, you know what, there's a better approach to this. There's a better approach. There's a more productive approach. Where is this going? I don't know. I haven't gotten a response yet. It's been 72 hours. And it's going to go one of three ways, right? It's going to go one of three ways. One, it's going to be this person. just ignoring me. I should probably check. They may have disconnected with me, or that's a possibility. Just totally ignoring it. This, be offended by essentially my offense. I'm offended. Me, Frank, I'm offended, and I'm sharing that I'm offended. And people sometimes get offended when you're offended. Well, why are you offended? This is what LinkedIn's for. It's for us pitching to one another. Well, it's really not, but if that's what you want to view it as, great. So the second response I'll get is I'll be ignored, or somebody will come back to me in a harsh way, and I won't say that this person will or won't, but they've come back at me in a harsh way and say, well, it's, if you can't take it, can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, Frank. This is how I roll here on LinkedIn. This is how I was taught to do it, and the building a relationship thing, well, that's for suckers, and I'm not a sucker. And I've gotten that, so that's another possibility. And then the other possibility is, ooh, you know what? You're right. That's all wrong. What I did was wrong, and I apologize, and I would like to get acquainted. I would like to try and do this over, and I'm open to that. I think we all listen. When I started networking, I was horrible. I was a case study and doing all the wrong things. Probably in that first 3 months, 6 months. And then you start to realize you get coached up by people and you see other people being successful and you really start understanding what networking's about. And then you start to get on your game with respect to it, if you will. And so I've shared tough love with people before. And I told this person, I hate responding like this. I could just ignored it. But, I'm not perfect and I make mistakes. And when I've always appreciated when people have been tough, giving me tough love. And I hope this person sees it that way. Happy to help them. I've got a network. And I'm open to helping other people. But I just think it's a wrong approach to do what this person has done, is essentially to come at me and just say, hey, this is what I need. And if I don't get what I need, then I don't want to have a conversation with you. I don't want to get to know you. I don't want to get to know you anyways. I just want to know if I can get what I want and have that be the end of it. So again, as I started, everybody holds a lesson for what you should do or what you shouldn't do. And today's tale is a lesson of absolutely what you should not do. Absolutely what you should not do.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.